What if I told you that one wedding planner destroyed a bride's reputation so thoroughly that her marriage announcement went viral for all the wrong reasons, and she did it using nothing but the truth, impeccable timing, and a network of angry vendors who'd been waiting years for justice? Stay with me until the end of this story, because what happens when karma gets organized is absolutely beautiful. Welcome back to Vengeance Vale, where we bring you the most satisfying stories of calculated revenge and poetic justice. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications, because you're about to witness a masterclass in professional revenge. And if you love this story and trust me, you will smash that like button, drop a comment telling me if you've ever dealt with a nightmare client, and share this with anyone who's ever worked in the service industry. They'll thank you for it. This is the story of how one wedding planner turned a bridezilla's perfect day into a viral disaster, and how an entire industry united to make sure the truth finally came out. Let me introduce you to Elena Vasquez and the bride who made the biggest mistake of her life. Elena Vasquez had been planning weddings for 12 years. She'd started as an assistant fresh out of college, worked her way up through some of the most prestigious event planning companies in Los Angeles, and finally opened her own boutique firm, Enchanted Moments, 5 years ago. She'd planned weddings for celebrities, tech moguls, and old money families. She coordinated events with million-dollar budgets and pulled off miracles with $20,000 budgets. She had a reputation in the industry as someone who was creative, reliable, and unflappable. Her portfolio was stunning. Her client testimonials were glowing. Her vendor relationships were rock solid. Those vendor relationships were about to become her most powerful weapon, but she didn't know that yet. Elena was the kind of planner who treated every vendor like a valued partner. She paid invoices early. She brought coffee to set up crews. She defended florists when brides complained about seasonal availability. She sent thank you notes and referrals and Christmas gifts. In an industry where wedding planners sometimes treated vendors like servants, Elena treated them like colleagues. And they loved her for it. She was about to need every single one of those relationships. It started with a consultation request that came through her website in March. The bride-to-be, Madison Hartwell, was 28 years old, getting married in 8 months, and her initial email was friendly enough. She wanted a Pinterest-perfect wedding at a vineyard in Malibu, approximately 200 guests, and her budget was $150,000. Not Elena's biggest wedding, but solidly in her sweet spot. They scheduled a consultation for the following week. The moment Madison walked into Elena's office, something felt off. She was wearing head-to-toe designer clothing, a Gucci bag, Louboutin heels, Cartier jewelry, and she made sure Elena noticed every label. "I only work with the best," Madison said, not as a compliment but as a warning. "My wedding needs to be absolutely perfect. I have 47,000 Instagram followers, and this wedding is going to be my moment. If you're already sensing red flags, hit that like button and let me know in the comments." Elena had worked with social media savvy brides before, and it usually went fine. But there was something in Madison's tone, a combination of entitlement and barely concealed aggression, that made Elena's instincts scream. Still, she was a professional. She smiled, pulled out her planning materials, and started asking questions. Over the next hour, Madison described her dream wedding in excruciating detail. She wanted white roses exclusively, but they had to be the most expensive variety, David Austin Patience roses, flown in from Ecuador. She wanted a custom wedding dress, but she'd already been to 4 designers and rejected all of them for minor imperfections. She wanted a live band, but they had to learn 5 specific songs that weren't in any band's usual repertoire. She wanted hand-painted silk table linens. She wanted a 5-tier cake covered in edible gold leaf with fresh flowers that matched her bouquet exactly. She wanted vintage champagne for the toast. She wanted. Elena took notes, calculated rough estimates, and delivered the news gently. "Madison, the wedding you're describing is going to cost approximately $280,000 to $320,000. Your budget of $150,000 is going to limit what we can achieve." Madison's face hardened. "That's why I'm hiring a planner. Your job is to make it happen within my budget. Isn't that what you do? Get creative. Call in favors. That's what I'm paying you for." Elena explained that wedding planning doesn't work like that vendors have set costs, that quality has a price. Madison cut her off. "Every other planner I've talked to has said they could do it. Maybe you're just not as good as your website claims." It was a manipulation tactic, and Elena recognized it immediately. But she also saw something else. This bride was going to be a nightmare regardless of who planned her wedding. At least if Elena took the job, she could protect the vendors from Madison's worst impulses. That was her first mistake, taking the job out of misplaced nobility. She should have trusted her instincts and walked away, but she didn't. She signed a contract, took the deposit, and immediately started working. Within 2 weeks, Elena had assembled a dream team of vendors, all of whom she'd worked with dozens of times: Rodrigo for photography, Chen for catering, Isabel for flowers, Marcus for music, Antonio for videography, and Sarah for cake. She'd negotiated carefully to get everything as close to Madison's vision as possible while staying within budget. She'd made compromises: domestic roses instead of Ecuadorian, a 4-tier cake instead of 5, vintage-style champagne instead of actual vintage, but the result was going to be stunning. Madison hated everything. Every decision Elena made, Madison questioned. Every vendor Elena recommended, Madison researched obsessively and found negative reviews from years ago. Every timeline Elena proposed, Madison rejected. The bride changed her mind 17 times about the color scheme, 14 times about the menu, and 23 times about the invitation design. She called Elena at 11 p.m. on weeknights with emergencies that were always just new ideas from Pinterest. She texted Elena during family dinners on weekends on Elena's vacation. She CC'd Elena on emails to vendors with contradictory instructions, undermining Elena's authority and confusing everyone. Comment below if you've ever had a client like this, because I know you have. But Elena persevered, because that's what professionals do. She managed Madison's chaos, translated her scattered demands into coherent instructions, and kept all the vendors on track. She worked 16-hour days for 8 months straight. She negotiated disputes. She absorbed Madison's verbal abuse during phone calls where the bride screamed about centerpieces and place cards. She smiled through meetings where Madison insulted her taste, her intelligence, and her competence. The wedding day arrived on a perfect November Saturday. The vineyard was gorgeous, bathed in golden afternoon light. The weather was flawless: 72 degrees, light breeze, not a cloud in sight. Elena had been there since 5 a.m., coordinating deliveries and setup. By 2 p.m., everything was perfect. The roses were arranged in stunning cascading centerpieces. The tables were set with precision. The cake was a work of art. The band had arrived early and was doing sound checks. The photographer and videographer were capturing beautiful pre-ceremony shots. The catering team was preparing a menu that smelled incredible. Then Madison arrived for hair and makeup. For the next 3 hours, Elena watched as the bride spiraled into bridezilla madness. The hair wasn't right, it had to be redone twice. The makeup wasn't right, 3 different attempts. The dress had an invisible wrinkle, Elena had to steam it 4 times. Madison screamed at her bridesmaids for breathing too loudly. She threw a bouquet at Isabel the florist because one rose was slightly more open than the others. She reduced 2 bridesmaids to tears. She called her mother a series of names that would make a sailor blush. But the ceremony happened. It was beautiful. Madison walked down the aisle to a live string quartet playing Canon in D. The vows were exchanged. The guests cried. The golden hour light made everything look like a fairy tale. Rodrigo the photographer was getting shots that belonged in a magazine. The cocktail hour was elegant. The reception began seamlessly. The toasts were heartfelt. The first dance was romantic. The food was exquisite, with guests complimenting every course. The cake cutting went perfectly. The band had everyone dancing. By 9 p.m., Elena finally allowed herself to relax. She'd done it. Despite everything, despite Madison's interference and chaos and abuse, the wedding was perfect. Guests were having an amazing time. The vendors had executed flawlessly. Even Madison seemed happy, dancing with her new husband, laughing with friends, posing for photos. Elena stood at the edge of the dance floor, exhausted but satisfied, already composing the invoice in her head. Then came the sparkler send-off. This was a Pinterest trend that Madison had insisted on. All the guests would line up with sparklers while the bride and groom ran through them to their getaway car. Elena had coordinated it carefully with the venue, ensuring fire safety protocols were followed. She'd assigned her assistant to distribute sparklers and light them at exactly 10 p.m. She'd briefed the photographer and videographer on positioning. It should have been the perfect ending. Except Madison, drunk on champagne and attention, decided to change the plan at the last second. Instead of walking through the sparklers, she wanted to run. Instead of the assigned path, she wanted to weave through the crowd. And instead of her comfortable reception shoes, she insisted on putting her 5-inch heels back on. Elena tried to advise caution. Madison told her to shut up and mind her own business. You can probably guess what happened next. If you're on the edge of your seat, make sure you've hit that subscribe button. Madison, running in heels on uneven ground, tripped. She didn't fall completely, but she stumbled hard, arms windmilling, and her cathedral-length veil caught on a sparkler. It didn't catch fire. The sparklers were the safe kind, and the veil was treated with flame retardant, but there was a moment of panic, some screaming, and Madison ended up with a small burn mark on the edge of her veil and a twisted ankle. The evening ended with Madison sitting in a chair, ice on her ankle, while the party wound down around her. She wasn't seriously hurt. She could walk. She'd just be sore for a few days, but she was humiliated. Her perfect exit had been ruined. Her veil was damaged. And in her mind, drunk and embarrassed and looking for someone to blame, it was all Elena's fault. The next morning, Elena woke up to 47 missed calls and 89 text messages from Madison. Every message was more unhinged than the last, but they all said the same thing: Elena had ruined the wedding, endangered the bride's life, and would not be getting paid. Not the final payment, not a tip, nothing. In fact, Madison wanted her deposit back, plus compensation for her trauma and her damaged veil. Elena took a deep breath and crafted a professional response. She outlined everything that had gone right with the wedding, explained that the sparkler incident happened because Madison deviated from the safety plan, and politely but firmly stated that per the contract, the final payment of $25,000 was due within 7 days. Madison's response came 2 minutes later: "Sue me, bitch. You'll never work in this city again. I'm going to destroy your pathetic little business." And she tried. Over the next week, Madison launched a social media campaign against Elena that was breathtaking in its viciousness. She posted on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. She wrote detailed reviews on every platform: Yelp, Google, Wedding Wire, the not all giving Elena 1 star and describing her as incompetent, dangerous, and unprofessional. She posted photos from the wedding, but only ones where something looked slightly imperfect: a napkin folded incorrectly, a guest caught mid-blink, the burned edge of her veil. She claimed Elena had hired inexperienced vendors, ignored safety regulations, and ruined the most important day of her life. The campaign went viral. Madison's 47,000 followers became an army of strangers who'd never met Elena, but were convinced she was a terrible wedding planner who endangered brides. The reviews poured in, many from people who'd never been Elena's clients. Other bridezillas found the posts and added their own horror stories about different wedding planners, creating a feeding frenzy of wedding vendor hatred. Within a week, Elena's business was in crisis. Potential clients were canceling consultations. Brides under contract were asking nervous questions. Elena's website was flooded with hate comments. Her business rating dropped from 4.9 stars to 2.1 stars overnight. "Drop a comment right now telling me how you'd feel if this happened to you." Elena tried to defend herself, posting calm, professional responses explaining what really happened. It didn't matter. Madison's narrative had taken hold, and social media doesn't care about truth, it cares about drama. The more Elena explained, the more defensive she looked. The more evidence she provided, the more people accused her of attacking a bride. She was losing a battle against an opponent who had no regard for honesty and an audience that wanted entertainment, not justice. The vendors watched this happening with increasing anger. They'd all been there. They knew the wedding had been perfect. They knew Madison was lying. Rodrigo the photographer had hundreds of images proving the event was flawless. Chen the caterer had guest compliment cards raving about the food. Isabel the florist had time-stamped texts showing Madison's approval of every arrangement. They all wanted to defend Elena publicly, but she asked them not to. "Don't get involved," she told them. "Don't let her damage your businesses too." But here's what Elena didn't know: this wasn't the first time Madison had done this. Over the next few weeks, as Elena struggled to keep her business afloat, vendors started comparing notes. They discovered that Madison had a history. In the 8 months of wedding planning, she'd worked with 17 different vendors. Not all at once, she'd cycled through them, firing people and refusing to pay them, always blaming them for her own bad decisions. There was a makeup artist Madison had used for her engagement photos, then refused to pay because the photos looked washed out, which was actually the photographer's editing choice. There was a dress designer who'd created 2 custom samples for Madison, only to have Madison wear one to a party, damage it, then refuse to pay the $3,000 design fee. There was a calligrapher who'd hand-lettered 200 invitations, only to have Madison claim they were the wrong shade of gold and refuse payment. There was a hairstylist Madison had hired for a trial, kept for 4 hours while she changed her mind repeatedly, then left without paying or tipping. The list went on. Smash that like button if you think you know where this is going. Every vendor had the same story: Madison would commission work, accept delivery or services, then find an excuse not to pay. She'd threaten bad reviews if they pursued payment. She'd claim damage or dissatisfaction. She'd use her social media following as leverage, knowing that small business owners couldn't afford a viral hate campaign. And it worked. Most vendors wrote off the loss and moved on, because fighting Madison cost more than she owed them. But she'd finally messed with the wrong wedding planner. Elena Vasquez wasn't just connected, she was beloved. When Rodrigo the photographer mentioned Madison's pattern during a vendor meetup, other professionals started sharing their stories. An event rental company came forward: Madison had damaged 3 chairs and refused to pay the replacement fee. A transportation service came forward: she'd kept the limo for 2 hours past the contract time and then disputed the overtime charges. A jewelry designer came forward: Madison had borrowed a bracelet for photos, never returned it, and blocked the designer's number. Someone created a private Facebook group, Within 48 hours, it had 200 members, every vendor, business owner, and service provider in the Los Angeles wedding industry. They called it the Madison Hartwell Files. People shared contracts, text messages, emails, and invoices. They documented every lie, every refused payment, every threat. The pattern was undeniable. Madison had scammed her way through the Los Angeles wedding industry for 2 years, leaving a trail of unpaid invoices totaling over $85,000. And now, they were angry. But more importantly, they were organized. Because while Madison might have social media followers, these vendors had something more powerful. They had proof, they had each other, and they had a wedding planner who knew how to coordinate complicated events. Elena looked at the evidence accumulating in the Facebook group and realized something. Madison had just announced her marriage on social media. The photos would be posted, the celebration would be public, and every single vendor who'd been scammed would be watching. That's when Elena had her idea. She didn't share it with the group immediately. She spent 3 days thinking it through, making sure it was legal, making sure it was ethical, making sure it was devastating. Then she made a proposal. What if, on the day Madison posted her official wedding photos and marriage announcement, every scammed vendor simply told their story? Not lies, not attacks, just facts, just their version of events, with documentation, all at once, all tagging Madison. The response was unanimous yes. They spent 2 weeks preparing. Elena coordinated everything like she was planning another wedding, which in a way, she was planning Madison's social media funeral. Every vendor prepared their post. They included screenshots of contracts, copies of invoices, text message exchanges, photos of damage, evidence of non-payment. They wrote clear, factual descriptions of what happened. No name calling, no drama, just truth, supported by documentation that couldn't be disputed. Elena created a shared timeline. She monitored Madison's social media obsessively, waiting for the moment when Madison would post her professional wedding photos and marriage announcement. She knew it would happen. Brides like Madison lived for that moment of social media glory. She just had to be patient. If you're loving this revenge story, hit that subscribe button and join the Vengeance Vale family. 3 weeks after the wedding, on a Tuesday morning at 10 a.m., Madison posted. The photos were stunning. Rodrigo really was an incredible photographer, and he'd captured the wedding beautifully despite hating his client. Madison had clearly spent hours crafting her caption, a saccharine essay about finding her soulmate and having the perfect wedding despite her nightmare wedding planner who almost ruined everything. The post went live. Elena waited 30 minutes, letting it gain some traction, letting Madison's followers start commenting with congratulations and heart emojis. Then she sent the signal to the vendor group. Go. What happened next was the most coordinated social media response in wedding industry history. Within 5 minutes, 17 vendors posted their stories. Each post was different, but the pattern was clear. The makeup artist posted screenshots of messages showing Madison refusing to pay for engagement photo makeup. The dress designer posted photos of the damaged sample dress and unpaid invoices. The calligrapher posted images of the beautiful invitations and Madison's refusal to pay. The hairstylist posted a detailed timeline of the 4-hour trial and 0 payment. Each vendor tagged Madison. Each vendor used the same hashtag that Madison had used in her wedding announcement. Each vendor's post was seen by their own followers, and the wedding industry is tightly networked, so that meant thousands of people saw the truth within the first hour. But the real genius was what Elena had done behind the scenes. She'd contacted several wedding industry blogs and influencers in advance, showed them the evidence, and gave them the timeline. They were ready. As the vendor posts went live, the blogs published articles. Pattern of non-payment, Los Angeles bride accused by multiple wedding vendors. The dark side of wedding planning when brides refuse to pay. 17 vendors, $85,000 in unpaid invoices, 1 bride's trail of deception. The articles included all the evidence, carefully documented and verified. They included statements from vendors. They included copies of contracts and proof of service. The wedding influencers, who had millions of followers collectively, started posting about it. They approached it from an educational angle, how to protect yourself from clients who won't pay and red flags every vendor should watch for. But they all used Madison's story as the example, and they all linked to the evidence. Within 2 hours, Madison's wedding announcement post had 3,000 comments, and almost none of them were congratulatory. People were posting screenshots from the vendor stories. They were asking Madison directly about the unpaid invoices. They were sharing the blog articles. Madison started deleting comments frantically, but they were coming too fast. She tried to disable comments, but the damage was done. The conversation had moved to Twitter, to TikTok, to Reddit, where she had no control. Comment justice if you love seeing karma work this perfectly. By the end of the day, Madison's wedding announcement had become the most viral wedding disaster of the year, but not in the way she'd hoped. News outlets picked up the story. Local TV stations ran segments about vendor rights and client fraud. A consumer protection lawyer appeared on the news offering to help the vendors pursue payment. Madison's Instagram following grew, but not with fans, with people who wanted to watch the drama unfold. Madison tried to fight back. She posted a tearful video claiming she was being bullied, that the vendors were lying, that she'd paid everyone fairly. But she couldn't explain away the contracts, the invoices, the text messages, the pattern spanning 2 years and 17 different businesses. Her own words, preserved in screenshots, contradicted her denials. When she claimed she'd paid the makeup artist posted her bank statements showing no payment. When she claimed the dress was defective, the designer posted photos showing it was perfect before Madison wore it. Every lie she told was immediately disproven with evidence. The scrutiny expanded beyond the wedding vendors. People started looking at other aspects of Madison's life. They discovered she'd had similar disputes with her landlord, with her car dealership, with various boutiques and salons. The pattern extended beyond weddings. Madison apparently believed that making a scene and threatening bad reviews meant she never had to pay for anything. Her social media influence was a weapon she'd used to terrorize small business owners for years. Her sponsors dropped her. Her 47,000 followers dwindled to 31,000 as people unfollowed in disgust. The followers who remained were mostly there to leave critical comments. Her husband, who'd apparently been unaware of her vendor schemes, posted a brief statement saying he was learning difficult truths and needed time to process. They separated 3 months later. The vendors, meanwhile, started getting paid. The viral exposure brought enough pressure that Madison's parents, who were wealthy and horrified by their daughter's behavior, began settling the debts to protect their own reputation. Every vendor received payment in full plus interest. Some vendors donated the money to business rights organizations. Others used it to establish emergency funds for colleagues dealing with problem clients. Elena took her payment and established a grant for wedding planners dealing with difficult financial situations. But the real victory wasn't the money. It was watching the wedding industry transform the conversation. Vendors started sharing resources about how to protect themselves. They created blacklists of problematic clients. They established support networks. They stopped accepting abuse as just part of the job. Madison's disaster became a cautionary tale taught in every wedding planning course. This is what happens when you treat vendors as disposable, when you weaponize social media, when you forget that reputation works both ways. Share this video with everyone you know in the service industry. As for Elena, her business recovered within 2 months. The initial hit to her reputation was completely reversed when the truth came out. Brides specifically sought her out because they'd read about how professionally she'd handled the Madison situation. Her reviews returned to 5 stars. She was featured in wedding magazines as an expert on vendor relations and client management. She wrote a guide for wedding planners on dealing with difficult clients that became required reading in the industry. 3 years later, Elena was planning a wedding at the same Malibu vineyard where Madison's wedding had taken place. During the setup, a bridesmaid approached her nervously. "I have to ask," the bridesmaid said. "Are you the Elena Vasquez? The one from the Madison Hartwell story?" Elena smiled. "I am. Why do you ask?" The bridesmaid grinned. "Because that story is legendary in my friend group. We all work in service industries, restaurants, retail, salons, and we show the Madison story to our managers whenever they tell us we have to accept abuse from customers. You proved that standing up to terrible clients can work. You're kind of a hero." Elena thought about that for a moment. She thought about the 8 months of abuse from Madison, the sleepless nights, the financial stress, the damage to her reputation. She thought about the moment she'd realized that the truth, properly coordinated and thoroughly documented, could be more powerful than any social media following. She thought about the 200 vendors who'd united to support each other, who'd refused to let one more small business owner be bullied into silence. "I'm not a hero," Elena said finally. "I'm just someone who got tired of being pushed around and had really good friends." But she was smiling, because she knew the truth. Sometimes the best revenge isn't dramatic confrontation or elaborate schemes. Sometimes the best revenge is simply making sure the truth gets told, all at once, with receipts, to everyone who needs to hear it. Madison Hartwell had tried to destroy Elena's business using lies and social media. Elena had destroyed Madison's reputation using truth and coordination. The difference between the two approaches was simple: lies eventually collapse under their own weight, but truth, once it goes viral, becomes permanent. If this story gave you satisfaction, if it made you think about the power of community and documentation, if it reminded you that standing up to bullies can actually work, then I need you to do something for me right now. First, absolutely demolish that like button. Let me know that stories of professional revenge and industry justice are what you want to see on Vengeance Veil. Second, leave a comment telling me about your worst client or customer story, because I know you have one, and this community is here to support you. Third, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because every week we bring you stories of people who refuse to be victims, who fought back smart, and who proved that karma sometimes needs a little project management. This has been the Wedding Planner's Masterpiece, a story that proves you should never mess with someone who knows how to coordinate complicated events, because they will coordinate your downfall with the same attention to detail they brought to your wedding. I'm your host at Vengeance Vale, reminding you that revenge is a dish best served with documentation, coordination, and an entire industry's worth of angry vendors who've been waiting for their moment. Until next time, keep your receipts, trust your network, and remember that the truth will set you free, but first it'll go viral and ruin your enemy's reputation forever. If you made it to the end, you're officially part of the Vengeance Vale family. Drop a fire emoji if Elena handled this perfectly, or a scales emoji if you think there was a better approach. And don't forget to check out our other stories of perfectly executed revenge, because once you start watching these, you won't be able to stop. Subscribe now and I'll see you in the next story of poetic justice.